Let me show you this. Let me show you this. So I'm putting together the part for my mix channel, right? And so look at my mix equipment that I have right here. So look at it. Look at it. Wait, look at all. You see all that, buddy? Look, you see that? You see all that, buddy? So I don't have any space, space on my table. I'm gonna wait till a few people come on in. I'm gonna do this. Okay, let me move this. My desk is so crowded. This. I just wait for a few people to come in. Yeah, you're nice to those. Yeah, yeah. This is one of the. Look at this, buddy. Yeah. All right, then let me move this. I have 4 of these things. Get that over here. Okay. Then get this over here. Over here. Set up here. Hey, Mohammed, how's it going, buddy? I'm gonna give it just a few more minutes to let a few more people come in. Okay, let me go ahead and get started, buddy. Let me go ahead and turn the music down. Great. And so so this next presentation discussion is about ecstasy. All right. And so we're going to talk about the Mesolimbic pathway and ecstasy, the impact it has on ecstasy. Ecstasy has on it. Let me just review a few things in the Mesolimbic pathway. Okay, so let's say more specific, Mesolimbic dopaminergic pathway. Remember, there's a cluster of receptors on the Mesolimbic pathway, not only dopamine, but dopamine is the predominant neurotransmitter. And I believe, I'm glad I'm getting this diagram here. Remember, this is the mesocortical pathway here, and this is the mesolimbic pathway. The mesolimbic pathway is the pathway that's basically for the reward, motivation, and learning systems. When this pathway is hyperactive, you get all of those features sort of increasing. and this is the target for substances of abuse. When this network is hyperactive, such as in the case if in the case of withdrawal, or if someone's born with a pathway that appears to be somewhat hypoactive, then they have a lot of decreased interest, decreased motivation, decreased energy, difficulty getting started, things like that. Maybe difficulty remembering things. Okay, so this is the pathway that's the target for the drugs of reward. Let me look at the pathways, the receptors on it. Okay. Mesolimbic receptor profile right there. Great. Just to look at the receptors real quick. Okay, primarily involving dopamine, right? Ooh, that's mesocortical. Okay, VTA okay. Mesolimbic. Okay, here are the dopamine receptors. The 1, 2, 2, 3. Okay, now look at the other receptors. Here, serotonin receptors, opioid, oxytocin. Let me see. Okay, I thought there were also alpha adrenergic receptors on here. All right, too. Okay, well, let me see, NMDA card. So let me see, NMDA receptors. Okay. The mesolimbic pathway in NMDA receptor plays a critical role in regulating dopamine release and are involved in the processes like reward, motivation, and addiction. Okay, yeah, so I was hoping my initial search would show the NMDA receptor, and then I would be able to connect that to ecstasy. So let me put ecstasy here. Oh. Hold on. Hold on. Dr. Reed. Hey. Okay. Okay, where am I at? Okay. Okay, CS. Okay. Here's a look at the mesolimbic receptor profile and influence on NMDA receptors in the context of ecstasy. All right. The mesolimbic pathway and NMDA receptors. The pathway is a crucial part of the brain reward system, heavily modulated by glutamate. All right. So remember, dopamine is a major neurotransmitter on the mesolimbic system. Also, glutamate there. This is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. Okay. NMDA receptors are the major type of glutamate receptor involved in various brain functions. So NMDA are types of glutamate receptors. Synaptic plasticity, neuronal excitability, and firing rates. This makes sense. Okay. The NMDA receptors are complex, typically composed of 2 subunits and 2 regulatory units. Okay, that's to make up these huge G proteins. Okay, let's see the interaction between ecstasy and NMDA. Ecstasy is a psychoactive drug known to influence the mesolimbic system, primarily by increasing the release of monoamines such as dopamine and serotonin. Right. Research suggests that NMDA can also affect NMDA. So ecstasy, oh, here it is right here. Ecstasy, MDMA. I can never get these right. NMDA, right? Okay. Okay, impact of glutaminergic transmission. Okay, so ecstasy can affect activity and expression of NMDA receptor subunits in the brain, like the forebrain cortex, caudate, putamen, and hypothalamus. And so glutamate causes activity and expression of NMDA, which is the glutaminergic receptor. Ecstasy causes the upregulation of glutaminergic receptors, and that creates a person who's very highly excitable. Okay, memory and cognitive functioning. Okay, MDMA, ecstasy, induce alterations in these type of glutamate receptors, alongside affects dopamine, and it may contribute to memory deficits. Involvement in areas of reward effects. Okay, NMDA receptors are thought to play a role in the rewarding effects of MDMA and in the resistance of drug-seeking behavior following abstinence. Yep, you see this? The reinstatement of drug-seeking behaviors following abstinence. That's a dopaminergic story. You know, people go places and be around places with people that they use substances with, and they get an increase in dopamine levels, and somehow through sort of like the conditional reward system, operant learning, the places activate the same sort of emotions in them. So if you stop using and went back to the locations where you use, you likely start to get those same feelings again. The potential for neurotoxicity. Okay. While further research is needed, some studies suggest that MDMA's, ecstasy's effects on NMDA receptors and glutamate release may be linked to neurotoxicity, particularly in the hippocampus. And that's the whole point of what I was trying to get to today. We had several patients in their early 20s, and the first thing we wanted to say to them is, can you please leave ecstasy alone? Right? Because the ecstasy is MDMA, and it causes the release of a specific type of glutaminergic receptor called NMDA, something like that. And when you activate that excitatory system, it's right till the wheels fall off. The ecstasy causes overexcitation that eventually results in the death of the brain cells. Accumulation of deaths in certain areas, particularly the hippocampus, is what we pick up. And these patients have difficulty functioning in school, functioning at work, staying employed, functioning in relationships, because they can't remember things. And when we do the neuropsych testing that tests the parts of their memory, the hippocampus, they can score in a range of someone who's actually diagnosed with dementia. And this damage can progress. And so I'm not sure if the cognitive impairment secondary to ecstasy or MDMA's use, I don't know if it continues to create damages as even after use. Okay, so those are the receptors. Okay, let's see here. Next, let's look at the let's look at the pathways here. Let me see. Let me show you another viewpoint of the brain, okay? Let me just see. Okay. Give me the brain. Okay. Okay, this is looking, here's the front, okay, anterior, posterior, okay? And this is like the left side of the brain. See the temporal lobe here, parietal lobe, frontal lobe. Sometimes okay. See, okay, I'm looking for the prefrontal cortex. Let me get off this page. Okay, I was trying to find. Okay, maybe this is that'll show the prefrontal cortex. Oh, I mean. So let me see if I can get to a few questions. Okay. First question is, good setup, Doc. Thank you, Nasir. Appreciate it, buddy. Okay. Great setup, Doc. Thank you. Okay, let me see. So Jan. Okay, Jam. Okay. How is the mesolimbic pathway involved in the love and euphoria people feel in ecstasy? Hyperactivity in the mesocortical pathway creates those positive and rewarding symptoms. I'm going to say symptoms of mesocortical pathway activity. So symptoms of the cocaine, methamphetamines. We review cocaine, we review methamphetamines. Now we're using ecstasy. All of these are targets for the mesocortical pathway, and they produce hyperactivity, or you get we get an improvement in all those symptoms that they wanted to target. Here, okay, hyperactivity in the mesocortical pathway, which is involved in cognitive functioning. So increased alertness, increased awareness, emotional regulations. They feel better, feel more alive, better attention, all right, and better motivation, better exact planning, organization, and things like that. And so these are the benefits. Now, when we give patients stimulants, stimulants activate the frontal lobe. I have to, and I'm sure it also affects this mesolimbic pathway. I think there's some is associated with learning, decreased interest, decreased motivation too. Okay. While often associated with deficiencies, okay, mesocortical dopamine hyperactivity, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, can contribute to impulsivity, impaired decision-making, and difficulties with attention and concentration. Why? If you're blasting on that mesolimbic pathway and you're using all this ecstasy, it's going to turn everything up. And so remember, those dopamine receptors also on the mesocortical pathway. And I think activation of the mesocortical pathway is probably what interferes with these things here, because that mesocortical pathway extends, I think, all the way up to the frontal lobe. So it's a long pathway. And so, so the answer to that question is yes. Next is here's the next question here. Okay. Is the connection people feel on ecstasy real, or is it just a neurochemical trick? You mean, do I really love her, or is it just chemicals? It's chemicals. Is it? Is all it? That's the thing about the ego, is that it interprets all these things, and the activity of the network basically determines reality. All right. And so, but it's all based upon chemicals. None of the objects around us have any meaning to them, or they don't have any type of value to them. All the objects on this planet are basically the same. It's how we interpret them and what value we place on them. And many occasions, our culture places one value on something this period of time, 100 years forward, there was no value for it. Let me get this phone call. Hold on one second. Okay, guys, sorry about that. I didn't think about how we'd handle the phone calls. Okay, so it's a neurochemical trick. Everything is a neurochemical trick. And so the objects only have what you assign the meaning to the objects. The objects around you do not have any inherent meaning. And so everything what you assign is assigned to it. Okay, let me see the next one here. Can ecstasy lead to emotional numbness or disconnection after the high wear off? It actually leads to withdrawals, hypoactivity in the network. Um, Let me try to see if I can give you an example of that. Let's see. Can you show me the let me see if I can ask a question like this. I want a diagram that should show the presynaptic, the presynaptic release of dopamine. And I think is they simply use up all the vesicles. Um, okay, here. All right, the process of dopamine release from the presynaptic cell. So when ecstasy hits the receptor, it causes the release of dopamine. The process of dopamine release from the presynaptic cell. Dopamine is synthesized and is packaged, right? Now it's packaged into synaptic vesicles. Remember this vascular monoamine transporter 2. These are very important vesicles because they package the dopamine and they exist in the presynaptic bud and they're ready for release. Okay, then you have the action potential comes around. When the action potential arrives at the presynaptic nerve, it depolarizes the membrane. Okay, calcium influx, right? This depolarization causes open voltage-gated calcium channels, causing the influx of calcium into the presynaptic terminal, right? The influx of calcium initiates the release process. Wow. Okay, vesicles docking and fusions. The increase in intracellular calcium triggers events similar to snare proteins. I got to look them up again. The protein helps tether the vesicles to the presynaptic membrane, docking and prepare for fusing. Wow. So it's a tethering system. Okay, exocytosis. When the snare complex assembled, the synaptic vessels fuse with the presynaptic membrane, releasing dopamine into the synaptic cleft. All right, then dopamine goes and it binds crosses and it binds the receptor. Dopamine binding to receptor. Dopamine molecules diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind to the dopamine receptors or the presynaptic neurons on the postsynaptic neuron and the presynaptic autoreceptors. Binding to postsynaptic receptor generate a signal in the postsynaptic neurons. Okay, and then you have reuptake by the dopamine transporters pump. So yeah, okay, and so that's the mechanism. So my understanding with things like cocaine and cocaine is very potent in the release of these presynaptic stored dopamine, methamphetamines, and also ecstasy. So when you get that flushing of the dopamine out of the presynaptic cell, when that party's over, the whole network becomes hypoactive, and that's when they begin going into withdrawals. So when they come into the hospital and you see them the following day, it's very hard for them to actually take a history because they are so fatigued and tired. And I think this is this hypodopaminergic state that they're in. Great. And so let me see. Let me have one more questions here. Okay, I have Max on the line here. How do people become emotionally dependent on ecstasy, even if they were not physically addicted to it? Those these people who have mesolimbic systems that sort of exist more in a hypoactive state typically feels the anhedonia, the apathy, decreased interest, decreased motivation. And so when they take substances of abuse, that increases that network activity, they feel better. And that's the positive reward. The goal is to feel better, and the tool to feel better would be the substance. And so that's one of the reinforcing effects, because you want to feel better. Um, and if they're not physically, even if they're not physically addicted to them, eventually this introducing these compounds into this system like that is going to interfere with its functioning. And I think that's what you're going to call some type of physical addiction to some extent. Okay, so I'm at the 26-minute mark. When we treat the medical complications connected to ecstasy use and provide supportive treatment, and you want to make sure you have the option to send the patient to neuropsych testing. For patients who use has a history of ecstasy use, I make sure that I get neuropsych testing to test their memory functioning, to test their prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of abstract reasoning, and also to test their frontal lobe, so that we can test their degree of measure their degree of executive functioning. It's very important to get these as a baseline when the patient comes in, because when you want to test them in the future, you can see you have some type of marker to assess their progress or during that period of time. So it's a pleasure for everyone. And again, if you're having any issues with ecstasy and you would like me to manage your case, I do a lot of inpatient work, and you can get an assessment on my online clinic, and we can do your workup on your online clinic, come up with your treatment plan and medication, then have you admitted to the hospital of your choice. So contact my online clinic, and if you need help, we'll be able to help you. Thank you so much. Other than that, I'll see you guys later. Take care, guys.